Hello, I'm Rags, the dog. Before we hop into the video proper, I want to put a reminder here at the beginning. The official Spookyween EFAP plushes from Makeship are near the end of their campaign. You only have until the 31st of October to purchase, and then they are gone for good. You'll never see them again. Halloween is the final day. The more of them you get in the set of 5, the more your discount. And you get a huge 25% off the whole purchase if you buy the set of 5. That's the plushes of myself, Mauler, Fringy, Wolf, and our first ever EFAP hoodie. It's a great way to help decorate the place and support us financially and get some really cool merch. A link will be in the description below. Don't procrastinate, though. You only have until Halloween, and then they are gone for good. Ooh, spooky voice. Speaking of spooky...
I can't believe it's happened again.
What, they made another Dragonheart sequel? There's like 5 of those movies now.
Whoa. I'm sick of seeing it everywhere.
Nobody talks about Dragonheart Vengeance.
It haunts me.
Yeah, it probably haunts a lot of people.
It's in my nightmares. It's in all of my waking hours. It's everywhere.
What, you mean Dragonheart? Dragonheart A New Beginning, Dragonheart 3 The Sorcerer's Curse, or Dragonheart Battle for the Heartfire, or Dragonheart Vengeance? Because, let me tell you, you don't want to see Dragonheart Battle for the Heartfire before you see Dragonheart A New Beginning. You don't want to make that blunder. You won't know what the hell's going on. You'll be really confused. It won't be pretty. And it doesn't help that they only have a number after Dragonheart 3, The Sorcerer's Curse. They don't put a number for Dragonheart A New Beginning, Dragonheart Battle for the Heartfire, or Dragonheart Vengeance. It's really easy to get them out of order if you don't know. It's just confusing, is what it is. It's just confusing.
The number 7.
The chance of them making a 7th Dragonheart movie are slim, but never zero.
Another games journalist has given another video game a 7 out of 10.
Ah, stop. Stop with the yelling. Don't be so loud if your shitty microphone can't handle it, please. The discourse surrounding IGN and their review system, namely giving out 7 out of 10s very liberally to all kinds of games, was somewhat reignited when IGN, in a review given by Tristan Ogilvie, gave it a 7 out of 10. Star Wars Outlaws. IGN. Good. 7 out of 10. Now, this video isn't going to be a review of Star Wars Outlaws itself. I have streamed the game here on my channel. You should check that out. It's very fun. Many laughs were had, as well as a lot of frustration, actually. And on our podcast, EFAP, we had 2 episodes devoted to covering Star Wars Outlaws. So, yeah, I've devoted about 50 hours of my life to this game. It's really bad. 3 out of 10 at the most generous is what I'd give it. It's broken, but it is hilariously broken sometimes, I'll give it that. Awful game, do not buy, avoid like the plague. What a disaster. However, ex-IGN writer, presenter, and podcaster is going to explain to us that, guys, actually, there's totally a really good reason why Star Wars Outlaws and many other terrible games get a 7 out of 10. While I consider myself incredibly skeptical, I'm willing to hear her out. I am certain that this impassioned defense of video game journalism will not at all get me to hate video game journalism even more than I already do.
And today I'm going to tell you why that's fairly common, actually, because there is, like, a pretty good reason for it. Or maybe not necessarily a good reason. I'm not trying to color this reason in any direction. It's just a reason that you see 7 out of 10s as being common.
Well, you started off the video by mocking the people who said IGN gave out another 7 out of 10, and then it seems like you just had a knee-jerk response of saying, oh no, it's a good reason why they give things a 7 out of 10. And this entire video will be a defense of that system from the company that you worked for 3 years.
To the extent where we now sometimes refer to 7 as like an average, which is weird.
I don't think that it's only weird. It is weird, but it's even worse than weird. I think that the idea that 7 out of 10 is average has been incredibly damaging to the discourse on the quality of media in general for years now. I think that 5 out of 10, if we insist on using a number scale at all, I don't love them or even really like them, but they can be useful. If we're going to insist on using a number scale, 5 out of 10 should be average. However, the connotation of 5 out of 10 is very negative compared to what I believe it actually should be. Average isn't bad, nor is it good. It's just average, it's in the middle. However, I think it's pretty safe to say that if you saw a game with a 5 out of 10 review, you would think that it's far more negative than it probably really is. So then, as a result, you don't want to give this average-ish video game that's okay. You don't want to give it a 5 out of 10 because people will think it's worse than it really is. So you say, you know what, maybe we'll inflate that a little bit. I'll say it's a 6 out of 10, or maybe like a low 7 to sort of set expectations where you feel like they kind of should be on a warped scale. And a lot of this is IGN's fault.
But let me just explain. First, if you don't know me, sometimes people meme on me for mentioning this, but you'd be surprised the amount of people who comment on my videos who don't even know what my current job is and assume that I'm a full-time YouTuber, let alone a job I used to have, so that's why I sometimes say it. Turns out, people don't know stuff.
All right, get to the point.
And I used to work at IGN. I was a writer there for 3 whole years, which makes me exceptionally qualified. The most professional, lauded source on the internet, educated to such a high degree.
Generally, when I go on rambles, there's like a point to it, but could you really just sort of like hurry up, please?
I started, and I feel like that really sells it. The one person on the planet equipped to tell you that step 1 before we get into the rest of this video.
All right, sweet. We're getting to actual statements and information. All right.
Some of y'all take game reviews way too seriously.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you, Alanah Pearce. I don't think that this is a good way at all to start out your defense of IGN's scoring system. Whether or not people take it seriously or not is not at all relevant to the problems that we have with it. It's also being oddly dismissive of a field that you're attempting to defend and has what I think is way too much projected volume in the video game space. If we had a criticism of, say, a news outlet, a newspaper, and our criticism was that they were constantly getting facts wrong and they were misrepresenting products that they were then advertising for, I don't think a valid defense would be, oh, you guys care too much about the news. However, by declaring that we care too much about video game reviews, I am certain that you will tell us what the appropriate amount of caring will be. Because, after all, I would love to know how I'm supposed to correctly engage with IGN reviews, and really other video game journalist reviews. According to IGN themselves, on their website, they say that we're all about having fun, but when it comes to reviews, we take things seriously. Reviewing is the most important thing we do, because this is when we help you make a decision about how to spend your money. It certainly seems that IGN wants me to take their reviews seriously.
I will explain why the 7 out of 10 is so common and why it's memed because it's so common and that it doesn't make sense. I feel like so many conversations about game reviews would be like so much more chill if you just remember that it's just some fucking guy's opinion.
What? No, it is not just some guy. This is a person who's not only being paid for this, they are being given a massive platform and having that opinion projected to hundreds of thousands of mostly lay gamers. IGN as a company is giving these people the projection strength to impact the buying decisions of all of these people and their hard-earned money. This bizarre beginning of your defense as, oh, these people, they're just like you and me, they're just a random person, they don't have any actual, like, privilege, they don't have any authority, they don't have any blah, 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 they're just like you and me. No, they're not. At some point, when you are given access to a massive platform to give your opinions on that impact the buying decisions of people, you are no longer just some guy. You're a journalist. You have ethics and obligations. You have to be responsible about what you say. I would put myself in a similar boat. I have a pretty big platform here on YouTube. If I was going to make a review of a game, I need to be accurate. I need to try and stay objective. I need to get my facts correct. I need to report to the people the accurate facts about what the game is. If I cannot do that, then I am not a good video game reviewer, and I would be doing a disservice to the people who listen to me.
I used to be that fucking guy. It's just some fucking guy has an opinion on something.
An opinion is not always just an opinion. Opinions can be objective in the sense that it is formed by objective facts about the world. I think the world is a sphere. That's not just an opinion. It's an objective opinion that I have because of all of the evidence for the world being the shape it is. I like Payday more than Butterfinger. That's just an opinion. Yeah, sure, it's subjective. But saying that something is just an opinion, especially when you have a massive platform that influences the buying decision of thousands of people, you can't hide behind, oh, it's just an opinion. What if someone said that Devil Daggers was an open-world, stealth-focused RPG? What if they said Super Mario World was a third-person shooter with branching narratives and 4 different endings? At what point does an opinion become simply an invalid one?
That's all a game review is.
If you think that a video game review, or really a review of anything, is just someone's opinion and nothing more, you should not be doing reviews.
The fucking guy who writes the review is no more or less qualified to have an opinion on any other fucking guy on the street about a game. That is my genuine opinion. That is the opinion that I held when I did it and got paid for it.
What an absolutely shit tier opinion that is to have. And what a damning indictment that is on IGN specifically, but video game journalism as a whole. If you are no more or less qualified than a random person on the street to write or talk about or review video games, why should anyone listen to you, and why should you even be paid? Would your fellow journalists agree with this idea that they're not at all qualified to talk about anything that they're talking about? This bizarre strategy reminds me of people when we're on EFAP and we're criticizing a movie or a franchise. A lot of the times we'll see people denigrate the movie or franchise, or they'll try and bring it low as if to say you shouldn't even care, you shouldn't even worry about it. Is it so difficult to explain why there's merit in what you do that you have to take the exact opposite route by just saying, no, you shouldn't even care anyway? If an IGN reviewer is no more or less qualified to talk about a video game than any random person on the street, then they do not deserve the platform that props them up as an authority on the subject.
I personally do not consider game reviews to be journalism, even though they technically are by definition of the word. But again, it's just some fucking guy's opinion, man.
If a reporter went to a war zone and did a review of what happened at the war zone to collect the facts and give it to us in a news publication, would you consider that journalism, or wouldn't you? Or does video game journalism get this extra special pass that nothing else does?
And they certainly are not objective and do not strive to be and shouldn't be, because they are opinion-based. They are not reporting, they're just, oh, fucking guy has an opinion.
It is actually kind of bizarre to imagine that this person was for years a contributor to IGN. What do you mean video game reviewers shouldn't even strive to be objective, and they're not objective? They should. They should absolutely strive to be objective. That is paramount to the process of reviewing something. You have to accurately report the facts on what the video game is, its mechanics, its substance, to the people who may potentially be spending their money on buying it. Obviously, for flair and character and style, you can put in subjective stuff like, this made me feel this way, I felt this way about that, or here's what this thing felt to me, blah, blah, blah. As long as those things are based on something that's real. If I'm in the market to buy an automobile, I don't want the review of that automobile to be just some guy's opinion. I don't want it to be just the subjective experience of the person who reviewed it. I want them to accurately tell me, what is the miles per gallon of this vehicle? What is its safety ratings? How many cup holders are in the consoles? I don't want them to say, oh, I feel like the gas mileage is good. Yeah, it seems pretty safe to me. I think there's enough cup holders in there. No! Tell me what reality is for this review. I need to know. That's why I came to you, because you have access to this product and you can tell me the facts about it. If the world was based on the idea of reviews are only subjective and reviewers should not strive to be objective, what a mess it would be. It would be a calamitous experience for a consumer. Why do you game journalist gremlins decide to try and give yourselves a pass here? No wonder people hate your guts and you're ridiculed across the entirety of the internet.
To be clear, before somebody gets upset with me,
Well, it's too late. You already said too many stupid things from your stupid mouth.
not being sexist here, women can also be some fucking guy.
Oh, I don't care.
Like I said, I used to be some fucking guy.
You know what? Maybe that's the first correct thing that you've said so far. You are just some guy. From what I've seen so far, and we still have so much more to go, but from what I've seen so far, you are indistinguishable from a complete layman. Like, you don't know anything about anything, and you have no authority to speak. You have no insight. You have no intelligence, no character.
Gender neutral. It's really just that the guy who does it for IGN has an editorial policy that he has to abide by, probably has more writing experience than the average person.
So those things that you mentioned do not make them more qualified. Okay, so why do they have them? What's the point? Why have an editorial policy? Why have writing experience? Why do anything? After all, it's just opinions. It's just subjective anyway.
And more people will read it, but that is really the only difference. No one's opinion on a video game is any more or less valid than anybody else's.
My opinion, me, Dog Rags, me, this guy, I have a more valid opinion than most people on video games, and I'm not saying that to brag or to big myself up. I'm saying that as just generally what I believe to be a matter of fact. I have played a crap load of video games for a crap load of hours in my life. I should be more qualified than the average person to talk about this hobby because of how much I have engaged with it and the level in which I engage in the hobby. Anybody who has engaged with video games for as much as me, they'd better damn well be more qualified to talk about them than just some random person.
The only exception to that, and like I feel that way about films and stuff too, the only exception to that is when...
Oh, you feel that way about movie reviews too? What if someone said that Jurassic Park was actually a biopic about Mother Teresa? Is that a valid opinion?
In my opinion, someone who has a ton of expertise is the one reviewing something. Tarantino, not just some fucking guy. Miyazaki, Hideo Kojima.
So what you're doing by making this comparison is you're saying that a professional video game reviewer does not have a level of expertise in the field of video games to give their review any sort of, well, merit. If you were here, I would ask you, is it even possible for someone who reviews video games to achieve that level of expertise? If not, then why not? And if so, then all right. How come those people aren't the ones doing the reviews at IGN?
Not just some fucking guy. They go beyond the sphere of some fucking guy in which all of the rest of us exist.
Well, how? What is the criteria by which you assess whether or not someone has expertise in a field? If you can have expertise in the field of films and that form of media, why can you not have expertise in the field of video games? Or I assume you think that you can? And again, as I asked before, if you can have that level of expertise, why are these people not writing reviews for the professional video game publications? Once you reach a certain level of expertise and you're no longer just some guy, do your opinions now have some sort of objective element to them? Or are they all still purely subjective? If they're all still subjective, then how does someone with expertise have better subjective opinions than somebody else? How do you distinguish those opinions? How do you say one is better than the other? If all of these opinions are purely subjective, then how have you decided that Quentin Tarantino and Miyazaki have made films that are high enough in quality to give them expertise? How have you determined that? These are actually important questions. They're not just random rabbit holes. They're kind of key to the whole element of being qualified, not being qualified, having expertise, and objective versus subjective opinions.
But otherwise, 100% of us, IGN, GameSpot, Kind of Funny, you in my comment section, we're all just some fucking guy. It's actually pretty crazy when you think about it. Like, really, the whole world is just run by just a guy. Like,
the whole world is run by a guy? What? But if I went to GameSpot and asked Mr. GameSpot, hey, do you think that you are more or less qualified than IGN or PC Gamer or whoever to do reviews and stuff, if they said no, then... I mean, like, I guess I would continue with the trend of video game journalism's constantly degrading themselves, which is odd and amusing in a strange way. But I would ask you, why should anyone support you? Why should anyone give you any money? Why should anyone listen to your opinion on something? If you're just some person whose opinion doesn't mean anything compared to anyone else's, then why do you have a YouTube channel? Why do you broadcast your opinions? Why would anyone give you the time of day? What's the point? I can answer these questions. Can you?
what are any of us doing? Think about how many things you don't know how to do or how many mistakes that you've made, and you're still here, and that's just the same as the rest of us. None of us have any idea what's really going on.
Okay, Okay, so this is like really weird. I don't know if I've ever had to explain to an adult before, like the concept of self-betterment, of how when you start out in a field or when you start out in life and you're young and stupid and an idiot and a moron and you're ignorant and you don't know anything, the idea is as you go day by day through life, you learn more and you increase your area of expertise. You learn things. You accrue knowledge. You become more and more knowledgeable about different fields and different subjects. And even if it's a specific video game, that's something. Even if it's a book or a movie series or a specific film, generally people try and learn and become better as they go through life. Oh, that was my mom. She texted me while I was recording that. My mother is an architect. Excellent segue, Mom. My mother is an architect. She would lose her shit if she watched this video. The idea of no one's more qualified than anyone else. Lives are at stake, Alanah Pearce, in some fields, all right? It's not just some guy and it's not just someone's opinion.
We're just some fucking guy who got a job.
And as a quick side note, I think that applies to me in a way. I think that I've gotten better over the years at what I do. I think I've become more critical and analytical, and I think that my expertise in media, analyzing media, logic and reason and storytellings, video game mechanics and how they intersect with all the other things going on in a video game, I think that's been improved greatly by the podcast that I run with my friends, Fringy and Mahler, and all of our pals and buddies and chums that we've met and talked to along the way, and helping to get their knowledge added to my knowledge and being able to converse with each other and being critical of one another and sort of fine-tuning our processes. I think that my editing skills have improved, though they're still pretty basic. I think that I am better now at what I do than many, many years ago when I first started. But that's to be expected. That should be the normal thing that all of us can say. That should be the normal experience.
There it is. Okay, but first, 7 out of 10. Why is it so common? Why does it feel like 7 out of 10 has become the average video game score, at the very least in the AAA gaming space? Why is everything a 7 out of 10? Why is it so common? What happened to the other half of the scale? Why aren't we using it? In my opinion, it actually is because 7 out of 10 kind of has become average for AAA games, but maybe not for the reasons that most people would think.
You spent all of that time to say it feels that way because it is. I'm just letting you know.
Important to note before we get into this that different websites do have different scales. A 9 for IGN is not the same as a 9 for some other website. You have any feelings about reviews that you look up what their individual scales mean?
So I am to take it that all of the reviewers who write reviews for IGN are told explicitly that their review needs to conform to the grading scale that they have created and at least hope to maintain on their website, right? Because I don't know how you can simultaneously say it's just some guy's opinion and then also say, see, there is a scale that they've created here with criteria that puts it onto one of these assigned numbers, 1 through 10. Also, The Last of Us is a masterpiece. Lol.
One thing that I see people mistake all the time is that they think a 10 out of 10 is a perfect score or that it's a perfect game.
To be clear, 10 out of 10 is a perfect score on this system, especially because you cannot do any better than a 10 out of 10. There's no 11. It is the highest score that you can achieve on the IGN scale.
For IGN, for example, a 10 does not mean perfect. It just means masterpiece, because no game is perfect except for Portal, and maybe also Deadly Premonition, and Doom 93, and Tunic.
Sometimes I can't tell what your actual position is because of your attempts at joking, but you do... I guess you don't think a game can be perfect? What is a flaw in chess? Is chess not a perfect game? What about checkers? What about Scrabble? Is Pac-Man or Pong or Tetris, are these not perfect games? Do they have flaws to them? Are these flaws only glitches? If yes, if the glitches were removed, would they be perfect?
But that's the list of perfect video games completed. Unless you have anything to add, editor of this video, Jacob Fullerton. The floor is yours.
Gungan Frontier. All your favorite characters are there. You get to play with Fombas and Falumpa sets and plant trees on the moon. And the UI is a clam. 10 out of 10. Perfect game.
All right, that was worthless.
There we go. Comprehensive list of perfect video games. No, really, none exist. 10 out of 10 means masterpiece, right? It is a masterpiece. It doesn't mean it's perfect.
Okay, so you are asserting now in your serious voice there is no perfect game. No video game is perfect, no matter how simple, no matter how rudimentary. Is it even possible theoretically for a video game to be perfect, to be without flaws? I'd mentioned that chess and checkers, like chess is a really good example. I think that chess is a perfect game. I don't think there are any flaws to chess. Is the issue that if you digitize it and you make it out of code, it can have like graphical glitches or bugs potentially, and so that means that the game isn't perfect? What about the concept of a game, right? Can the concept of a game be perfect? And is this a claim that you're making objectively? Are you asserting, like as a matter of fact, that there cannot be a perfect game?
But for whatever website that you read reviews from or whatever discourse you're involved in, I recommend checking out their individual scales. And if you look at a 7 on the IGN scale, 7 means good. Not great, just good. When I worked there and I reviewed video games and movies and stuff sometimes, Dan Stapleton, the executive editor of reviews at IGN, told me to treat what score I would have if I was having trouble as what would I say if someone walked up to me on the street and asked. So a 7 would be, yeah, it's good. It's not great, it's good. It's good.
Well, wait, so what's the point of the 1 to 10 scale? Because then that random person on the street would have to be familiar with IGN's 1 to 10 scale ratings. I thought it was a reviewer being just some guy who just has some opinions that you shouldn't take seriously because they have no expertise or quality, that their opinions are no better or worse than any random person's. Alanah Pearce, is what you're saying that an IGN review is just some random person's opinion to another random person? What is the point of the 1 through 10 scale? I thought that was an attempt at being somewhat objective with your scoring. And why would you want the score to be for some random person on the street? Wouldn't you, I mean, you'd know this, right? Wouldn't you want to make the scores relevant to a video game player? It should be that you're making a score that would be designed for a video game player, not the average person. Someone who plays video games, who has money to spend, who's looking for video games, is at least somewhat familiar with video games and their mechanics and how they play out. Surely that is the person for whom the scale is designed, not a random person on the street, right?
Because, to be honest, assigning a score to however many thousand words you've written where you try to really explain every single nuance of this thing and why you do or don't like it is extremely difficult and sucky.
Well, it isn't extremely difficult at all, right? Especially with the broadness of the criteria that you've given yourself on this 1 to 10 scale, certainly IGN's. And if it's sucky, you don't have to do it.
But it's just really important to audiences. Like, it gets clearly so much engagement from these websites. People want the opinions distilled into a little number.
Yeah, that sucks. I wish there were far better systems that were more commonplace, and I wish that people didn't just race to see what the number is at the end of the article without taking into account all the things the article says. Then again, it's not even something we really should be worrying about, because, after all, an IGN reviewer reviewing a video game, their opinion is no more or less relevant or insightful or important or valid than any random person's anyway. Maybe the fact that IGN reviews are not seen as having quality is part of what really lowers the value of that 1 through 10 ranking.
It generates so much discourse. It generated this video, technically, and probably many videos about 7 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 game reviews that exist on this platform. Audiences clearly are very attached to the review score. For writers, it sucks.
If the writers were at least generally accurate about the positions that these games have on the number scale, I don't think it would feel like it sucks too much. And if anything, summarizing everything into a number is actually really easy, especially with how broad it can be and how subjective it can be on that scale. Oh, wait, it's right. The scale doesn't matter, right? Because it's just about what would you tell some random guy on the street, and it's all just someone's opinion anyway. So why do I even mention the scale? You don't seem to give a shit about it. Not really. And if this is some kind of an attempt to go, oh, boo-hoo, IGN writers, they just have to put a number there because that's just what people want, and we just have to do it. No, fuck off. I don't feel any sympathy for your people. IGN can do whatever it wants to do starting tomorrow. They can just decide we're not going to use number scores, we're going to use a different system that's more robust and interesting and insightful. But they won't.
So when you're having trouble being like, I don't know what these words distill to, how am I going to figure that out?
IGN themselves say that their reviews will generally range from 1,000 to 4,000 words. If the average reader has problems distilling the quality of a video game based off of a 1 to 4,000 word article on that video game, I would say that is an incredible failing of the writer. Years ago, when I did reviews for exclusively games, I never felt like I needed to end the reviews in a number out of 10. I talked for 10 to 15 minutes with gameplay in the background, and I explained to people the positives and the negatives and my experiences with the game. And somehow, people didn't walk away from those reviews being confused and not able to understand what I was saying about the game.
A good way to do it is, what would you say someone came up to you on the street? So a 7 is, it's good.
Why appeal to a scale at all? Why not just say it's good or decent or excellent or whatever adjective you want to use? Why apply a number out of 10 to it at all in the first place?
It's not great, it's good. And firstly, that does encompass a lot of video games, especially when you're a reviewer.
The objective quality of a video game doesn't change because they're a reviewer or not.
People who review games or play games professionally are, by virtue of the thing that is their job, playing a lot more video games than most people.
Than most people? Yeah, that's probably true. Than most gamers? Maybe true. Than most video game enthusiasts, though? I don't know. That feels like a stretch. Now that I think about it, it actually kind of hurts your argument here the more they play games, because you would expect that they would have more expertise, more knowledge, be more qualified, but I guess that's not a thing to you, so why don't they? Why doesn't a person who plays a lot of games have those things?
Now, before you get mad at me for that, it's just that they're allowed to do it during work hours. So they're playing more video games than every other human who has a job that is not in the games industry because they're allowed to play games at work. So like by default, they have more hours on any given day in which they can/are playing video games.
Maybe, potentially, perhaps.
But because the average games journalist is able to play more video games than the average reader, it's kind of another reason that a review is just some fucking guy's opinion.
Well, you haven't given a first reason, but like surely that would be the opposite of the case, right? Surely the more games you play, the more informed you should be on video games and your familiarity with their mechanics, controls, etc., right?
What somebody who has played 1,000 games thinks of a game is inherently going to be different to what somebody who's only played 100 games thinks of a game.
Inherently? I don't know about that. Can those two people not arrive at the exact same conclusion about the same video game, like a Tetris or Pac-Man or Pong? What if the person who played 1,000 games has a really bad memory or just hasn't absorbed those experiences well? And inversely, what if the person with 100 games under their belt was much more engaged and analytical with those games? If the difference in games played is inherent, then wouldn't two gamers with 1,999 games played have different views on games? And wouldn't any two gamers, regardless of games played, be inherently different? I think the people who use inherently don't often understand the weight that it carries when they sling it around in sentences.
Because you are coming into that with that wealth of knowledge, experience, and those set your expectations.
Well, then it's definitely not inherent then. Two different gamers can have completely different sets of expectations based off the kind of games they've played and how many and what they find to be satisfactory experiences.
You might find something bland or generic because you've played 10 other games like it. If someone has played less games than you, they may not feel that way. Imagine somebody playing Star Wars Outlaws as their very first Ubisoft game.
I'm not certain why you felt the need to specify the first Ubisoft game that they played, but I would imagine that they would be dissatisfied with the bugs and the glitches and the terrible story and the awful writing and the inconsistent mechanics that constantly break, the lacking rewards for exploration and the empty places to explore, the repetitive, dull, tedious combat. Maybe if they had really low standards and if they were stupid, they would think it's really good, but I don't know. I guess it's possible.
I myself was like, I'm kind of burnt out of Star Wars. I'm kind of burnt out with the Ubisoft formula right now. This feels very samey. It's not grabbing me. So I tried and I decided that I wasn't going to play any more of it. But someone who's never played a Ubisoft game before might be like, holy shit, this is crazy. What is this?
You mean in a good way or in a bad way?
We're all just a bunch of guys who have just fucking opinions.
My opinions are way better than yours. And I'd hazard a guess that pretty much everybody watching this video has better opinions than you two. I already feel quite confident that you are extremely unqualified to speak on the topic of video games.
It's all so subjective, and it's impossible not to be subjective. You're inherently bringing all of the experiences that you have had into every opinion that you form on pretty much everything.
Yeah, sure, it's impossible to be completely subjectiveless. However, because we have these things called brains, we are able to recognize that our experiences are subjective. We recognize that we have biases. We can strive to be objective in how we look at things. I absolutely despise this attitude because I've seen it before. Oh, people are subjective, so you can't be objective. So fuck it. It's all subjective, all the way down. No, to hell with that shit. I recognize my experiences are subjective, however, I can strive and yearn to be objective, especially with things like reporting information to other people to influence their buying decisions. It's such a cowardly, lazy cop-out. Oh, we're subjective, so video game reviews are purely subjective when we can't... No, fuck that shit. Accurately report the facts and the mechanics of the video game to your audience. If you can't do that, don't review video games.
And that's why reviews are what they are. They're just an opinion.
My reviews were not just my opinion. My reviews were backed up by the facts of what that game were. Its mechanics, its story, its writing. Feel free to denigrate your opinions by calling them just your opinions. I will do no such thing. Clearly, I hold myself to a far higher standard than you do.
Secondly, I think there's a misconception that 5 is supposed to mean average on the scales, where it doesn't, at least not on any of that I've ever seen. A 5 for IGN means mediocre.
Well, if you can believe it, and you should because you worked there for years, IGN doesn't have an average number. There's no position for an average game on their chart. It's actually mildly insidious. Yes, 5 is called mediocre, but etymology aside, let's actually read what the description of a mediocre game is. 5. Mediocre. This is the kind of bland, unremarkable game we've mostly forgotten about a day after we finish playing. A mediocre game isn't something you should spend your time or money on if you consider either to be precious, but they'll pass the time if you have nothing better to do. Let's compare that to 6. Okay. These recommendations come with a boatload of ifs. There's a good game in here somewhere, but in order to find it, you'll have to know where to look, and perhaps turn a blind eye to some significant drawbacks. I think that 5 for mediocre is definitely more negatively worded than a 6, which you'd think, yeah, of course, 5 versus 6, right? But there's no average spot or really average description on the scale here. If you are an IGN reviewer and you play a game and you come away from that game thinking, oh, okay, it's an average game. It is an average game. And then you look at the scale, the 1 to 10 scale for IGN, hopefully that's what you're doing, and you're looking for a place to put it numerically, what do? Well, the mediocre is written kind of negatively, like it's more bad than good, and the game's average, so you're kind of encouraged to give it that 6 slot. If there's an average game, I think that the scale is sort of designed and written such that an IGN reviewer is more encouraged to put it on the 6 instead of the 5. It is a soft encouragement, sure, but I think it does exist. So, yes, Alanah, 5 is not average on the scale. There is no average on the scale. And I don't think that's an accident.
They describe it as something that is bland and unremarkable. And I guess with that definition, I wouldn't be super uncomfortable personally categorizing Star Wars Outlaws that way, maybe. I haven't played enough that I feel confident saying that.
Well, as someone who spent about 35 hours in Star Wars Outlaws and has completed the game, I can very safely say that giving it a 5 is being way too generous.
But that becomes complicated when you realize how many games do fit below the 5 category, and that's kind of the point of this video.
Well, what do you mean? That shouldn't matter at all. Who cares how many 2s and 3s there are? That doesn't impact the kind of game that a 5 is, or the quality of a 6 or a 7. Those things are completely independent of one another. And if the scale is really bottom-heavy with terrible games, well, that's fine. Make better games, and the scale wouldn't be bottom-heavy. It's not the fault of a scale that there's a lot of bad games.
5 is not actually baseline average, and it makes sense that most scores that these outlets give are going to be above a 5, because in comparison to the amount of video games that come out, the AAA games that people are playing, the games that are popular enough for people to even be talking about them, for somebody to need to write a review about them, are going to be in that upper category.
Wait, what do you mean they're going to be? Like it's preordained? You should call them as you see them. You shouldn't say, oh, they're AAA games, they're going to be better. Well, you don't know that, not until you review them. That's the whole point. If you go into the scale or go into the review thinking, oh, it's a big AAA game, of course it's going to be a 6 or up, well, then you've already tarnished the system. You're bringing in that bias. And the whole point is to be objective and to recognize that bias and not let it cloud your judgment.
Like, there are so many video games that come out. And the truth is, most games that release are very, 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 very flawed.
Okay, then if you review them, you can just put them on the 1 to 3 part of the scale if you need to, right? That's why the scale has low numbers for those bad games, right?
Most games that come out don't even have an inch of the complexity that you see in something like Star Wars Outlaws.
Well, what does complexity have to do with it? Tetris and chess and checkers and Pong and Pac-Man, all of these games are better than Star Wars Outlaws, but they're way simpler. Would you say that Peggle is worse than Star Wars Outlaws because it isn't as complex? It should be about how well the mechanics are executed and synergize with one another. It shouldn't be about just sheer complexity.
And you may take that with some kind of like offense, as though you think that Star Wars Outlaws is not complex. And that would be totally fair if you compare it to everything else that you've played. But if you compare it to the games that come out, it has incredibly complex systems.
No, not really. It's actually not that complex, and what it has isn't really mechanically sound. It constantly breaks and can't handle itself. Even if you compare Star Wars Outlaws to older Ubisoft games, there's no comparison. Far Cry New Dawn is more complex and sound than Outlaws is. Assassin's Creed Origins, Assassin's Creed Unity, and hell, The Division 2. These are games that are more complex and they're more mechanically sound.
Most games aren't even close to that level of complexity.
So?
Most games that release have one song, they have maybe 2 inputs, they have very few mechanics, they're just...
Wait, the amount of songs in the soundtrack is a determinant on how complex a game is? I mean, I suppose that's technically true. What's the point of Star Wars Outlaws having more songs and more mechanics than, let's say, the average random game, if those mechanics are broken and don't work and are constantly busted? I just don't understand why we've just arbitrarily chosen complexity to be the thing that determines the quality of a video game and not its execution and its construction.
You kind of press the same button over and over and over again. A lot of them crash all the time. They're very buggy.
Oh, it's about game crashing, huh? Well, during my playthrough of Star Wars Outlaws, the game crashed twice, which I hear is lucky that it crashed that few times, and then it also blue-screened my PC in the middle of one of my streams. And trust me, sister, we don't want to get into a discussion on how buggy Star Wars Outlaws is.
Sometimes they don't even have music. Most games that come out do not have even like an inch of the complexity or nuance that you are used to in AAA video games.
Better to be simpler and high quality than complex and low quality.
Bad UI, unintuitive controls.
Oh, bad UI and terrible controls, huh? Let's go ahead and we'll use an example from my stream of Outlaws. This is a screenshot from my second stream near the end. While the UI is customizable in certain ways, it really fails to do what a UI should do, which is convey important information to the player. G are your Bacta vials. These are your health potions, essentially. You press G and you heal yourself with one of these. It does not tell you the maximum amount of vials you can carry, which is something that you can upgrade with kits and abilities. So I could have 4 vials out of, what, out of 4? Out of 5? Out of 6? I don't know. These white bars here are your health, and getting extra bars for your health is also a very useful upgrade to get in the game. These bars don't have a numeric value that is shown to the player. You have no idea how much actual hit points you have, just that you have this many, and the more is better. Do I start with 10 and then 20 and 30, or is each one of these 25 hit points or 50 hit points? I don't know. We've got no clue. Now, I am playing on PC, and if you press U, yes, U, then it will bring up another menu that tells you that 5 will bring up your electrobinoculars and 4 will bring out your grenades. In this screenshot, I have 3 grenades out of a maximum of, I don't know, it doesn't tell you. I could be 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5. Your grenade capacity is something you can upgrade with your talents and with your gear, but it doesn't tell you what your maximum grenade count is. In order to check it, you have to press U. Yes, you have to press U in order to find that out. Even equipping grenades with 4 will not tell you how many grenades you have. But I guess I shouldn't expect a game that cost $200-300 million in 4 years of development time from a massive video game corporation. I guess I shouldn't have had such high expectations for them to be able to get down the basics that video games figured out decades ago. But hey, Alanah, at least it's complex, right?
Just all of the things that net them somewhere between 1 to 5 on a game review scale. That means that they kind of need the space for the 5 to 10 for the other games.
Well, you just described all scales. The lower numbers are for the bad games, and the higher numbers are for the good games. That's what the numbers are for.
But basically at a point where hundreds, if not thousands of games are released every single day, usually from one-person teams who do not do it full-time, you don't even hear about these games, but...
Well, wait, what do you mean? If they're not being talked about, if nobody knows about them, and if they're not on the scale, then how come you're allowing them to have such a huge influence on the scale? No games or amount of games should impact the scale. It doesn't matter what the games are. The scale should be independent. Games should conform to the scale, not the other way around.
I'm going to do an experiment for you all right now. I'm going to boot up the 3 most recent releases on Steam and play them for you right now. I don't know what they are. This is not rehearsed.
Oh my god, Alanah, you know you can't show porn on YouTube, right?
It's not going to be the games on the bestsellers list, just the most recent releases, new releases on Steam, and I will show you exactly what I'm talking about, of like what majority of video games that release actually look like. Okay, everybody, I've downloaded the 3 most recent releases on Steam. They are Doll Catching Simulator, Future Breach, Youngblood, which is free to play, so that's pretty cool, and Zool Dungeon. Let's start with Doll Catching Simulator.
We're not going to watch her play or attempt to play Doll Catching Simulator.
It functions, to be honest, very simple. The art is not great, but it works. 7 out of 10.
Okay, I don't know if that's a joke or not, but
Next, we have Zool Dungeon.
Zool Dungeon. It's like soul, but with a Z.
I have no idea what this is. Trap? Zool, not enough. Unlock trap first. Okay. Right click to spawn your monster. Click him. Spawn him. Click him. Spawn him. What's the timer for? Why am I being timed? The surviving hunter, 100 destroy hunter camp. I'm earning money, I think, maybe? Oh, this text. Increase base HP, PT on summon. Increase movement speed on... Oh, yeah, okay. I can wait. I can give him little buffs. That's cool. So now we got like a jacked up Hobu. Am I trying to kill these guys? Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, got it. I think this is... Maybe I just spawn these in to kill these dudes. Oh, did I lose? Well, that's Zool Dungeon. Compelling.
I let the entirety of her Zool Dungeon gameplay run because of how disrespectful I found it. Her scheme for this video is to take newly released Steam games and show how terrible and stupid they are so that she could justify Star Wars Outlaws being a 7 out of 10, as if any other game's quality should impact its placement on a scale. She played what seemed to be a single game of Zool Dungeon, which was probably at most 10 minutes, including the fiddling she did beforehand, without trying to engage with the game in any good faith way. Reading every description and making every statement like it's a question is just a petty, childish tool to seem aloof and disingenuously curious. I decided to purchase Zool Dungeon for myself, and I played it for 3.2 hours. I left a review on Steam based on that experience, and you can read that review there if you wish. It's up, it's public. It was mostly a negative experience, and I do not recommend the game. However, I gave the game a fair chance. I gave it its time, and I didn't just disingenuously fiddle with it for a few minutes to try and force some point of mine as an attempt to uplift Star Wars Outlaws of all things. I do not like this idea of shitting all over somebody's indie game they made as Alanah Pearce does. It's elitist, the actual apex of game journalism snobbery. So it's a new saying, you can take the Journo out of IGN, but you can't take the IGN out of the Journo. And this attitude of elitism is all in the service of filleting IGN and their shitty, bizarrely over-positive review of Star Wars Outlaws. Oh, look at the little pixel game somebody made and threw on Steam. It's so shit, and I won't even try and figure it out or engage with it, because if it's good, then I might have to say Star Wars Outlaws isn't good either. It's disgusting behavior. It's unbecoming of a journalist. It's unbecoming of an adult. I don't like Zool Dungeon because I played the game for hours and tried to engage with its mechanics and didn't think that they meshed well. You didn't like Zool Dungeon because you're trying to suck off Star Wars Outlaws. We are not the same.
Last but not least is Future Youngblood, a game that is apparently made with Unity. Game? Hello, this is a preview build to show the initial gameplay. Later versions will... Oh, okay, hang on. I can't do this one. As it turns out, Future Breach Youngblood was just a demo, so I'm gonna go back to the Steam library, or the Steam store, rather.
What? No, they're giving you a demo. Play the demo. Demos are good. We should encourage more devs and publishers to give us demos.
And we will get deep in the dungeon. I need to reach floor 240 to escape from here. Okay, I like the music. Not something I could see myself playing for a super long time at this rate, but it's really just arrow keys, which means you can move through it pretty fast, and it's, you know what, it's pretty fun. It's not bad.
Similar to Zol Dungeon, I purchased Deep in the Dungeon on Steam and played it for about 4.5 hours or so. I haven't beaten the game yet, and honestly, I likely never will, but it is a decent game that, similarly to Zol Dungeon, I would describe as a noble first attempt at what's potentially a really cool idea. It's basically a puzzle game where you have to move your character down and around on a board, one tile at a time, collecting items and gathering equipment, leveling up, choosing skills, and either avoiding or fighting enemies. I wouldn't say that it's good, but I think that with polish and a bit more content and things, it could be a good game one day. Alanah Pearce seems in no way to show any desire whatsoever to engage in this game's mechanics, systems, or strategies in order to actually figure out what the game entails. You did nothing but press the down arrow onto monsters that kill you and then said it was pretty fun. You are not engaging with the game in any way. You are a liar. You have no idea if it's fun. You have no idea what you're doing. You're only performing poorly in an attempt to appear as if you understand what's going on around you.
You get the idea. Probably the top 10 looks like that kind of thing. Maybe even more than that.
You're just guessing. You have no idea. Even if you bothered to play them, you wouldn't honestly engage with them. You'll never know.
And websites like IGN have to effectively reserve the lower half of their scales for those games because those games exist.
No, if you have a 1 through 10 grading scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., each have numbers that are reserved for those corresponding, well, whatever the description of each number is. It depends on the scale. If you have a 1 through 10 grading scale, and number 3 is for really bad, and a lot of games are really bad, then there's going to be a lot of games in 3. And that's the end of it. It's done. It's over. No other number apart from 3 out of 10 needs to be touched.
And websites like IGN have to effectively reserve the lower half of their scales for those games because those games exist.
Even though of the 3 games that you actually tested, the first one, the doll one, you gave that a 7 out of 10. The third one, Deep in the Dungeon, you seem to have very positive things to say, though you didn't actually assign it a number, but it seems like you were going to give it at least a 7 out of 10, so 2 out of your 3 examples don't work for what you are trying to get them to prove?
They just very rarely review them because most people don't know what they are. Like, if people aren't searching for them, people aren't really trying to figure out if they need to buy them or not, so you don't really need to write a review for them.
How can a game that's not even on the scale be allowed to so dramatically influence the entirety of the scale? That's... what's a way to describe it? That's the batshit crazy train to what the fuckville.
But in case one goes viral, like the day before, for example, very bad, basic video game, they still need to have that bottom half of the scale there for those games.
Just to be clear, the bottom half of the scale should be reserved for games like Star Wars Outlaws, because it's a bad game. It belongs on the bottom half of the scale. No other video game that has ever been created or will be created comes into the equation when we're talking about the quality of Star Wars Outlaws. The bottom half of a scale shouldn't be reserved for bad games in the same way that the top half of the scale shouldn't be reserved for good games. That's a weird way to look at it. Each individual game needs to correspond to whatever number accurately describes its quality. If it's bottom heavy because there's a lot of bad games, then so be it.
And when you consider how many games are like that, it starts to make a little more sense why you keep seeing AAA games on the other half of the scale. Like, that's the...
Alright, we'll address your stupid words in a moment, but, like, what is wrong with your editor? Is he high? Is he smoking crack cocaine? What's wrong with him? One of the reasons your video is annoying to listen to, apart from the words coming out of your mouth and what they mean, is that your editor for some reason has, like, the voice of one of your sentences playing before your previous visuals have gone away. Like, the audio in the video is cut independently.
The other half of the scale. Like, that's the breadth
And now your voice is layered over itself.
of the scale. Like, that's the scale. Like, that's
I don't understand this schizo zoomer editing. I've seen it before plenty of times where there's no gaps, no pause in between sentences. Like, does he think that people are going to get bored of you in between words and they'll leave? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. This doesn't matter. What matters is the dumb things you say. That is just a pet peeve.
And when you consider how many games are like that, it starts to make a little more sense why you keep seeing AAA games on the other half of the scale. Like, that's the...
No one has a problem if a good AAA game is rated highly on the scale. People have an issue that you are being extremely, and I say you, it's IGN, but in fact, it's you. People have an issue when they perceive a bias in favor of the game when it gets a much higher rating than it deserves. When I go to Tristan Ogilvy, who's been at IGN since 2009's review of Star Wars Outlaws, and I see twice in his review 2 commercials for Star Wars Outlaws by Ubisoft that they gave to you to sell copies of the game, forgive me for thinking that you're a bit biased in favor of this terrible game that you said was actually good, 7 out of 10. I know more about Star Wars Outlaws than most people will ever know about Star Wars Outlaws. It is a 3 at best.
breadth of the scale that is being considered. AAA games are inherently a lot more complex than majority of the games that come out every day, so they are far, far, far more deserving of the top 5 part of that scale. The scale is not just AAA. Does that make sense?
You know, I don't think that you know what inherently means. A AAA game is not inherently more complex than most games that come out every day. And it is not more deserving of a higher number on the scale because it is more complex anyway. But we've talked about that. You seem to think that more complex just means better quality.
Am I articulating this? I remember when Diablo 4 got massively review bombed by the user ratings, maybe a month or so after it came out, which was deserved. They made some disappointing changes, but people were giving it like a 2 out of 10 and calling games journalists shills.
Just to be clear, game journalists are shills. They're shills for the massive corporations and companies that provide them with insider exclusives, interviews, and access, as well as the revenue from the massive banner ads for the games that game journalists review. However, Alanah Pearce, let's not, after all, forget about you. You, who worked at IGN for 3 years. You, who even did IGN's review of Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Origins, giving it a 9 out of 10. Amazing! And look, I liked Assassin's Creed Origins quite a bit, but a 9 out of 10, calm down, alright? You see, Alanah, your very career is something that makes people raise a brow. It's symbolic to the core of the kinds of issues that people have with the corruption in game journalism. You were a game journalist for years, and then one of the companies, one of the big companies that you were supposed to be covering, then hired you. Now, isn't that something to ponder? Before I even started to work on this video, I was just in a call with people. We were talking about game news and things of that nature. So I went to VG247 to look at their Silent Hill 2 review, because I was curious about what I would find if I went to their site and disabled ad block on one of these game journal websites. This is the screenshot I took. Silent Hill 2, available now. 5 out of 5 stars from VG247. As far as I'm concerned, all of you game journalism websites can go straight to hell. You're nothing more than the middleman who delivers me the commercials of corporations.
Because they weren't giving it 2 out of 10.
I don't care what the random internet comment said, grow up.
But when you see the games that I just showed you, and then you compare it to something like Diablo 4, which has complex systems and enemies and classes and a ton of progression and music and sound design and art, you can see why it doesn't really exist in the same realm as a lot of the 2s that come out every day. It was functional, and it had this cool feature where you could actually play it for more than 5 minutes without being extremely bored.
Of the 2 games you played that I also purchased and played, neither of them made me bored. And, let's be frank, you have no idea how complex those games are because you didn't give them a chance. You played them for 2 seconds and said, and then carried on. Yeah, Star Wars Outlaws is a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I'm a games journalist.
Basically, Steam is full of a lot of things that, like, barely count as video games or what the general public understands a video game to be.
So, I don't care what the general public has to say about video games. They're not part of this industry. Maybe I'll ask my mom a random video game related question just to get an outsider's opinion. I mean, it doesn't even matter. Zol Dungeon and Deep in the Dungeon are obviously recognizable as video games. Anybody would know that. My grandmother would know that.
And most of them aren't even really worth reviewing, but the scale has to still exist for them. And it's like...
Okay, first off, you have no clue if they are worth reviewing because you haven't reviewed them yet. Even by the miserable standard of what you've shown the world an Alanah Pearce review is like. And no, the scale does not have to exist for things that are not on the scale. What is wrong with your brain?
I get why if you've only played AAA games, if you only played really, really popular games that do rise above, the schlock of majority of the stuff that comes out, that you would have a skewed perception of what the scale looks like.
Yeah, if only you were as understanding and had the great, deep perspective that Alanah Pearce does, then you would understand that actually Star Wars Outlaws is totally a good 7 out of 10 game. The sooner that you completely exit the industry and never return, the better the industry will be.
Your scale is probably different to the scale of some other fucking guy based on just what you've played, where reviewers often have played a lot of stuff.
Tristan Ogilvie has been working at IGN since 2009, and he was in the industry before that, too. That doesn't make his Star Wars Outlaws review any less garbage and misleading. If you can play games for that long and be immersed in the video game culture and be reviewing games for what's probably decades at this point and still pump out crap like that, what are you doing?
That falls on the lower half of that scale and is the reason the lower half of that scale exists. I think you could pretty easily make a case that they should just not touch those lower half games at all, and that you could have a scale just for AAA games and they could be 2 separate things.
You realize you've just created a dichotomy for, let's be frank, indie games, which are shit, and AAA games, which are really good. You realize that's just what you did, right? You see, you're in the system. You're already consumed by it. You can't take the IGN out of the Journo. It's in your brain. You don't even think about it when you say it. It's just what happens. Let me ask you this, Alanah Pearce. How do you know to not, quote-unquote, touch the lower half of the scale if you don't review them to know that they belong at that end of the scale? Do you understand? You're putting games on the scale before you've reviewed them. The process of reviewing them is to find out where they are on the scale. You don't understand scales. You don't understand what reviews are even supposed to do. You've got it completely backwards.
But I think that would also be pretty complicated to explain to audiences in a lot of cases, where I feel like it's probably easier to explain, no, a 0 or a 1 or a 2 is for games that don't function. Diablo 4 making changes that negatively impact the game didn't make it completely non-functional, or didn't make it so that the only thing you could do was play a claw machine.
Star Wars Outlaws doesn't function. It's a buggy, glitchy mess. Its mechanics just buckle under the pressure of actually, I don't know what it's under the pressure of. It's so bare bones and shallow, but still not functional. I don't even know how to describe it. Well, I guess I just did there, didn't I? It does not matter how shitty you think Zol Dungeon or Deep in the Dungeon are. Star Wars Outlaws is crap.
You know what I mean?
You don't know what anything means.
But yeah, you could certainly argue for that if you wanted to. Go ahead. I'm just explaining why it currently exists the way that it does.
Just to be clear, the way that you have decided to try and attempt to explain why the system works as it does is to say, reviews are worthless, don't listen to them, we don't know what we're doing. This was your strategy. Not the one I would have chosen, but I'm not the shill, so toodaloo.
And to be clear, I'm not trying to defend IGN in making this video in any capacity.
Sure, sweetheart.
Even when I worked there, they had game reviews come out that I staunchly disagreed with.
Not that it matters, because it's all just someone's opinion, and no one's opinion is more valid than anyone else's, so I don't give a shit what you did or didn't agree with.
When I worked there, they had the Doom 2016 review, which was written by a freelancer who gave it was like an insane low score. Yeah, it was 7.1.
How have you determined it is insanely low? Because it's just his opinion, and his opinion isn't more or less valid than anybody else's. In the words of you at the beginning of this video, you shouldn't care about review scores.
For Doom 2016. And I remember like everyone in the office being like, do not fucking agree with that at all.
Doesn't matter though, it's all subjective, it's all just opinions, and nobody is more or less valid than anybody else, especially game journalists. You taught me that one, Alanah.
But it was from Job Gilroy, who did not even work in the IGN office, a total freelancer.
Why would that even matter if it's a total freelancer? Is his opinion less valid because he's a freelancer? Why would you even bring that up? By your own standard, it shouldn't matter.
I don't think he even wrote for IGN very often, like maybe 1 or 2 times. I'm not actually sure.
Why would it matter if he wrote once for IGN or 100 times for IGN? What would that change? What's the point of bringing this up? What's the point of mentioning this?
But like they've certainly had review scores that I fundamentally disagreed with, and that's just sort of the reality of reviews being just written by some fucking guy.
Out of curiosity, how can you fundamentally disagree with somebody else's review of a video game if it's all subjective and it's just some guy's opinion and there's no objectivity and there's no attempt to be objective? How could you have a fundamental disagreement on it? There are no fundamentals in your worldview, at least as far as it relates to video game reviews, this general sector. There is nothing fundamental to disagree with. You don't have a foundation. You don't have some core. It's all just whatever you feel. It's all just vibes. Oh, this is how I felt playing the game. Here's my subjective opinion. What's fundamental about it?
But yes, this is essentially why you might feel like you see so many review scores that are above a 5, or you feel like the lower half of the scale is being underutilized.
No, people's problems are a lot of these AAA games that are really bad or middling are getting good to great reviews that they shouldn't deserve from you people. That's the issue. People are not upset at you when you give a high score to a game that deserves a high score.
It's why 7s feel like it might be average, and why I've heard people like call to change the 7 to a 5.
No, people say that because IGN is kind of infamous for inflating the scores of bad games to give them higher numbers than they deserve. That's why an IGN 7 on the realistic grading scale is average.
But it's just when you factor in games that you probably haven't played or probably haven't heard of, the bottom of the scale gets very, very, very full very fast, and your AAA games start to look a whole lot better in comparison.
This video is sad.
And finally, I know that this isn't going to sway anybody who, like, already feels some way about this, but
well, if the upcoming arguments are anything approaching the quality of what we've seen so far, then your fear is a well-founded one.
Just to establish it, no publisher is giving an IGN reviewer a bunch of money to influence a review score.
Well, yeah, it's just an I'm sorry. Do you think when people ask how big was the Ubisoft check, do you think that we think that they actually wrote a check with a number on it made out to IGN, and then they ripped it off their little check pad and gave it to you, and then you went to the bank? Do you think that's what we think? Are you stupid?
There are ways that companies try to manipulate positive review scores in ways that I think are extremely egregious and actually far worse than I think the general public realizes. Like, this stuff is huge. I'm gonna make a whole separate video about this. I was gonna put it in this video, but then it's like too many topics in one video. It's a lot.
There were 2 commercials for Star Wars Outlaws in the middle of the Star Wars Outlaws review on IGN.com. There's a reason why so many people, moi included, believe that you are completely and totally compromised by the industry and we don't trust you.
I will make a separate video about basically like publishers, companies trying to influence people to get positive reviews and the manipulative tactics that are used for that.
Alanah, do you realize that your behavior in this video is indistinguishable from someone who was paid money to try and shill for IGN and Star Wars Outlaws to justify its bloated positive score? It's just an observation that I've been able to make in the time we've spent together.
There is so much to say and so much to unpack. But where just handing somebody money to give a game a score, which, by the way, as an aside, I've seen people recently suggest that IGN was paid to give Star Wars Outlaws the 7 out of 10. Why would Ubisoft pay for a 7? A 7? If you're paying a reviewer, you couldn't just slip them, like, you know, a company like Ubisoft with a shit ton of money, just like another 50 grand or whatever the fuck, and be like, just make it a 10. Why would they pay for a 7?
Because, you imbecile, a 10 would be obvious. Are you stupid?
But handing somebody money to give any review score is extremely illegal. And these companies have giant legal teams who are so hardcore and so intense about this kind of stuff. Their whole job is to prevent the company from getting sued or getting fined.
Alanah, you realize that what you just said was these companies have armies of lawyers to prevent them from being sued. Therefore, they would never try to do anything illegal. Are you stupid?
That is the job of these legal departments. I have worked with some of these legal departments. They are annoyingly hardcore. Stupid legal rules where they try to avoid getting sued for the dumbest shit. You're like, nobody's going to sue you for that. And they're like, doesn't matter. Somebody could, so don't do it.
My previous commentary stands.
Paying somebody to have positive sentiment, even if you disclose it, is illegal. Did you know that?
Yeah, it is illegal. That's one of the reasons people have a problem with it. This isn't news. You're not doing any breaking journalism here, Alanah. When a company chooses you of all the people out there, when they choose you and offer to fly you in a plane out to their studio across the country, and they pay for your hotel, they pay for a nice restaurant meal, they set you up in their offices and invite you in with a smile, they get you personal face-to-face interaction with the developers when they sit you down in a big cozy chair and give you exclusive access to game previews and builds that nobody or very few people get to experience, and you know that it'll be good for building your online profile, your YouTube channel, your streams, your articles. Sure. That's not explicitly paying you to say nice things, no. Because a wink and a nudge, that's not money. They offer you a pathway to future offers, exclusivity, information that will grow your career and benefit you. Alanah, do you think that these companies make sure to bring in people who will be very critical and negative about their products? Or do you think that there's a reason why they choose who they choose? I know it makes this job of yours a lot harder, but it's the fight you decided to take up. Could you maybe engage with the issues that people really have?
So, like, if I do a sponsored ad here on YouTube, they cannot ask me to say something that I don't believe.
Yeah, we know.
They are not allowed to ever say, hey, can you say this sentence?
Alanah, this is YouTube. It is full of ad reads and sponsorships and commercials where talking heads and webcam warriors happily read verbatim the script given to them by the companies whose products they pay to have advertised. Now, that isn't necessarily bad. It depends on what the sentences are, what the information is, if it's true, if it's earnest, if it's been, double-checked by the person reading the ad. But, I mean, come on. You think all those YouTubers who promote Raid, Shadow Legends, or Morgan and Morgan all just happen to come up with the same phrases or pitches or strings of praiseworthy adjectives, all independently of one another? Corporations can guide narratives, Alanah. In fact, you should know that this is exactly the kind of thing that they want. Repetitions of the same phrases, the same slogans, the same descriptions, each its own attempt at mimetic infection into the way that we engage with those products and services. And, of course, to be clear, not all advertising is bad, obviously. After all, I'm listening to you on my Dan Clark audio headset as I speak into my Audio-Technica microphone next to my Logitech mouse and my EVGA keyboard as I watch the pixels of the MSI graphics card on my Asus monitor. And my human shaves with a Manscaped electric razor. Trying to act as if games journalism is just too pure and it's above this. Stop. Come on.
I think I've received pushback on that maybe once where they were like, can you say that? And I was like, I don't feel that way. And they had to be like, okay, they are not allowed to do that. That is very, very, very illegal and taken very, very seriously. So.
All right, if you say so. I just, call them as I see them. Oh, that sounds like an advertisement for the Circus Maximus. I call them as I see them.
Paying for positive sentiment without disclosure is going to get you fined, but even with disclosure, also going to get you fined. Like, extremely illegal, again, taken very seriously. And asking games journalists specifically to lie about review scores, I think, is one of the dumbest things that a company could possibly do. Like, that's going to come out so fast if it were actually happening.
Well, it has happened before. Most notably was the Kane and Lynch review controversy with GameSpot, where Jeff Gerstmann was fired for a bad review because the publishers of Kane and Lynch put, pressure on GameSpot. Now, that's old. That was, 12 years ago now. But again, you have to understand that the relationship that game journalists have with game publishers and developers, it's a bit incestuous in a way. There is heavy, heavy, heavy pressure on these game journalism websites to be in good standing and to be on very good relationships with the people who provide them with the insider access. I didn't save this screenshot for no reason. Soft pressures and understandings exist and they add up. They're part of the culture. As I mentioned before, there are 2 commercials for Star Wars Outlaws in the Star Wars Outlaws review on IGN.
It's an industry full of people who are so poorly paid and are often very bored with the stuff that they're able to write from an industry that gives them like no information about anything and is constantly withholding things and just making them like rehash press releases because the games industry is so cagey about information. Frankly, they are desperate a lot of the time to write the article that gets their name out there or gets views or makes people like them. It gives them the prestige of breaking this huge conspiracy news story. Like, so many, I would say 90% of people who work in that games media industry would be frothing, chomping at the bit at the opportunity to leak this story.
All right. Alanah Pearce's reasons why game journos wouldn't accept bribes for money or fame. Reason 1, Oh, shit.
If it were happening, it would have leaked 1,000 times over. And I actually don't doubt that it was happening in the 90s and 2000s before a lot of the more strict regulations came in. Of course, companies are going to try to do it. They just can't anymore.
No, they just use different tactics that have just become a regular part of games journalism.
And publishers do have other ways of trying to influence review scores, like I said. I'll have a whole separate video about that. But they are not giving game reviewers money to give games a 10 out of 10.
Thank you, Alanah. This whole time, I thought they gave them a brown bag with a $sign on it, full of money, and said, write good review, and that was just how it was. Thank you for clarifying. You've done such a good job.
Again, just like think about everything you've ever disagreed with somebody on.
Okay, Alanah, I will think about everything I've ever disagreed with somebody on. Done.
Think about the dumbest fucking thing that you've seen on the internet that you disagreed with somebody on.
Does this video count?
Your toilet paper. You put it over or under. Heated disagreements about that stuff. Over is correct, by the way. Anyone who puts it under, I will literally, in your house, if I see that you have the toilet paper under, I will change it in your house. I don't care.
I will never allow you to poop in my house.
You and some fucking guy are gonna have different opinions. It's boring, but it's true.
Well, it's not boring to have different opinions than other people. It's boring if everybody agrees. And the reason that, well, let's be frank, my opinion and some fucking guy's opinion, mine is going to be better. When it comes to video games, if I make a review of a game or if I talk about a game, I'm going to reference things that happened in the game. I'm going to talk about mechanics. I'm going to have a reason why I have the opinions that I have. It's not just going to be purely subjective based off of whatever my feels were during the gameplay. And my opinions will certainly be better than some fucking game journalist scum.
And as an aside, on my own aside, I promise you, if I ever...
Why is your microphone so shitty?
...find any evidence or any even suggestion that game reviewers are being paid off, I will tell you in a heartbeat.
Good, I hope you do. However, I'm not going to hold my breath, Journo.
I would get so many subscribers. People would be so happy with me. I would get so many views, so much credibility. She finally outed it.
Yeah, you hear that scratch in her microphone?
She outed it.
I double-checked to make sure it wasn't like my file or Vegas being weird. That's just in her video. It's just like peeking and scratching. It's awful. Please.
Wow, look at this person go. That's my epics. Instead, I'm doing my routinely dumb bitch move of telling you the truth that I know most of you probably don't want to hear.
It isn't the truth, and if it was the truth, then it means game journalists are even dumber than we thought all along. It is a dumb bitch move, though.
Not most of you. It's just the ones who don't want to hear it really don't want to hear it and are definitely going to get mad at me in the comment sections of this video.
Haha, I said really dumb, stupid things that make no sense whatsoever, and if people are mean in the comment section because of the dumb things I said, actually that just means that I was right and they're just angry, so there.
Like, I'm aware of that. In fact, I will probably lose subscribers for this video. I actively reject the proven to be excellent strategy of saying the thing the masses would like to hear and make the controversial video that will force people to yell at me.
Yeah, you're such a champion for truth and justice, and you're persecuted for righteousness. Like, oh, yeah, sure. All right, yeah, that's true. True, very true.
All of that to say, it would be a lot easier for me, or as someone who actually does work in media, to come out and say reviewers are being paid off. If it were happening, they would have done it by now a million times over already. I would have done it by now.
Well, no, it would be much more difficult for you to say that, because you would actually have some sacrifices that you'd have to make. You'd probably lose a bunch of connections, like work connections, personal connections, like acquaintances, old co-workers, friends who are still in the industry, because you're still in the industry. You went from IGN to Sony Santa Monica. And if you were coming out as a journalist and saying this, then you'd have to have actual evidence and proof of it in the explicit way that you think that we think it is. Or else you'd open yourself up to being like sued for defamation or something. I don't know. Towing the line is the easy thing to do, and you've done it well. Despite all reason and logic, you've towed the line. Congratulations. Sony thanks you. As does Ubisoft.
A million times over already. I don't review games that don't accept codes. I have no reason to lie to you about this. It's just not happening.
You obviously have reason. There's like built-in reasons to accept bribes. The money, the connections, the access, the information, the exclusivity. There are obvious reasons.
It's just some fucking guy. There are also just a bunch of factors where it comes to some fucking guy's opinion, where the person who reviews the game is the most likely to be excited about that game because they put their name down on the sheet where they said they wanted to review it, so they are likely to be more interested in it.
You went from working at IGN to working at Sony Santa Monica. A game journalist who really wants to work at a particular company has reasons, and as you prove, potential rewards for their career for signing up to review certain games, to give them good review scores, or to review them favorably, more favorably than they deserve. If I, for whatever reason, really wanted to work on Ubisoft games and get a job at Ubisoft, then maybe I would say, hey guys, I really like Ubisoft games, and I know a lot about them, and I would really like to review Ubisoft games, so when the next Assassin's Creed whatever game comes out, and I give it a 9, maybe Ubisoft sees that, and they're like, hey, this person wants to work with us. Oh, they were a game journalist. What did they rate our games again?
Basically, some fucking guy is probably into the thing that he signed up to play however many hours of and write a review of.
Well, yeah, I would hope that they are enthusiastic, but not too enthusiastic, because we don't want them to be overly, gracious to a game because they, really subjectively just like it.
That's why he signed up to play it. And my suggestion for people looking for game reviews that they align with is...
find YouTubers that you like and you trust, or streamers that you like and trust. Just people. Normal people who are just doing this because they're grinding, because they love video games, because you trust their honesty, you trust their integrity. And I'm not saying that because I'm a YouTuber streamer, but I like seriously. Find people you trust, find people who have integrity, and support them.
Actually, to just find an individual, or a couple of individuals, a reviewer like one writer or one YouTuber who you really align with, and actively seek out their opinions.
Well, you're close. You're close. It's not that you align with them, right? It's because they're trustworthy and they have expertise and they can demonstrate skill and being objective when reviewing things.
I don't even feel like it makes sense to read every IGN game review when IGN is just 20 different some fucking guys who have vastly different opinions from one another even.
However, I'm sure that they all conform to that 1 to 10 scale accurately, right? Even though they have vastly different opinions and it's all subjective, right? We can all trust that they will put things accurately on the scale objectively where it should be, right?
And frequently disagree on review scores, even as employees of the same company. Like I said, while I worked there, there were review scores that were given out that I really did not agree with. But there's like nothing you can really do about that because I'm not the some fucking guy who reviewed that particular thing. What I do personally is just ask my friends. I don't read reviews at all. Literally never.
If you literally never read reviews, then it means you didn't read the review that Tristan Ogilvy made of Star Wars Outlaws, where he gave it a 7 out of 10, saying it was good, and you're here defending it anyway. Oh, did you not mean literally? Then don't fucking say literally.
They mean nothing to me whatsoever. And I even felt this way when I worked in that space.
While you were at IGN being paid to make reviews, you felt that reviews meant nothing to you? I mean, I can't even imagine saying something like when I worked as a server in a restaurant, I would never have said, "Oh yeah, serving doesn't mean anything to me." As a YouTuber, I would never say, "Oh yeah, YouTube videos don't mean anything to me." As a streamer on Every Frame of Pause, I would never say, "Oh, streaming doesn't mean anything to me." How do they do it? How do they just say these things? That's fucking wild. But they just say them. They just say them. These journos, man.
I just asked friends what they think of something and what they like about it and what they didn't like about it. And based on what I know about that friend and what they said they liked or they didn't like, I can make an assessment on whether I will or will not like something.
What? You made an assessment? Careful, Alanah. That sounds like you might have some kind of objectivity in your existence, and we wouldn't want that, would we?
Basically, 7 out of 10 is the average because the scale accounts for the amount of games that do not have even half the complexity of most of the games that you play.
We've gone over this. It makes no sense, and it's extremely stupid. But thanks for saying it on a YouTube video, because it's good content for me to ridicule.
And does need to have the lower half of that scale in case one of those games gets reviewed.
Like, just one more time, because we're about wrapped up here. She's saying that Star Wars Outlaws is a 7, because there are bad games that get lower numbers. And they're on the scale 2, on the low numbers. Take us home, Johnny.
Again, I'm not trying to defend that. Just trying to explain it for anyone who might be interested or like has never thought about it before. And was, if this video makes anyone go, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense," then great.
To be clear, anyone who thinks that this video makes sense is a retard.
And remember, game reviews are just the opinion of
some fucking guy. Yeah, hooray, we're done. The video's over. We did it. We reached the end. It only took us an hour and a half. If I didn't have a reputation for being long-winded and loquacious, then I suppose that would surprise people. But I feel that video, well, I think there was a lot to say. Alanah Pearce doesn't strike me as a particularly intelligent or charismatic individual, and this video of hers is only a reminder of why game journos rub me the wrong way. And really why they have such a negative reputation in general. I can't think of any industry that seems to hate its audience and cozy up to its benefactors more than video games. Her demeanor is elitist and condescending. She fillets AAA video games like Star Wars Outlaws while unfairly shitting on indie games. She doesn't understand how rating scales work. She seems to be under the impression that it's not possible nor should even be the goal of a reviewer to try and be objective. Let us hope, my dear viewers, that people like Alanah Pearce stay far away from video games so that the industry can be better for their absence. And I doubt it will happen. These tumors will latch on to these projects as much as they can. But, it's nice to dream. It's nice to dream. We should at least thank her for such an open, damning indictment of IGN as a company, even though that doesn't seem to really be what her intention was. And for showing the world what kind of high-caliber, intelligent individuals both IGN and Sony seem to be hiring. So, hey, thanks for the wacky video, Mrs. Pearce. And with that, I shall bid all of you adieu. Farewell. I will see you later on, hopefully, for a video in a little bit. Hopefully some video game streaming for Halloween, maybe, if I can get my PC to stop crashing with games. And who knows what else. Come and check us out on EFAP. Again, another EFAP plug. I have a podcast. It's called Every Frame of Pause. I run it with my good friends Mahler and Fringy and all of the other pals and comrades that we've been able to wrangle into our fun media-related discussions. We stream every week, typically, 1 p.m. Central on Saturdays. Be there. Give us a look. Give us a holler. I'll see you there. Bye-bye. Ciao. Toodaloo.
It's the spookiest time of year, and what's more suitable than EFAP celebrating with a brand new set of terrifying plushies? Introducing the EFAP Halloween plushie set, starting with Mauler the Longpire, a terrifying monster of bloodthirst and long. This cuddly beast is both infamous and primal in his desire to drain the very soul from the world of media, and he's coming for you. But he's not alone. How could the Longpire be complete without his trusty doggo? Rags-o-lantern. Poised charmingly in his pumpkin, your Rags-o-lantern will be there to offer his support and encouragement and sarcastic commentary to all your endeavors. This gourd-adorned Shiba Inu will give your pumpkin patch a pantalooned pooch's worth of company, and of course, both of these fine, fiendish fellows are joined by yet another. Though his eyes may have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, Fringy the Raven will gladly perch atop your couch, cuddly and at the ready. This corvid ventures nowhere without his scythe, and he's more than ready to slash his way through all obstacles. But not without the final member of this cutthroat cohort. Hear the bell as it strikes the hour of the wolf. When the midnight sky is red, a beast shall emerge from the forest to plunder your local pizza parlor. Behold, the dreaded werewolf, complete with the sunken eyes of a beast who avoids the searing heat of the sun, carrying with him a slice of his latest victim. This legend of the night will surely be a fantastic addition to this crew of dark demons and pumpkin playmates. But that's not all, no sir. Have you ever left home only to worry you're leaving the members of your favorite podcast behind? Do you despair when Mauler's commentary, Fringy's laughs, Wolf's fury, or Rags's puns aren't around anymore? Well, anguish no longer. Now you can stay warm and cozy during those chilly autumn days while constantly explaining to everyone that, no, it's not electronic fapping, I swear. Introducing the official Every Frame a Pause Halloween hoodie. Perfect for lounging around indoors, shopping, long walks on the pier, weddings, baby showers, funerals, Halloween, Christmas. Complete with the expected furnishings of the season, as well as some gorgeous artwork by Black Soul Odin. The EFAP hoodie is ready to keep you warm and comfy through those winter months. There may even be a surprise guest on the back. Pick up yours today, because once the campaign ends, it'll be gone for good. And don't forget Mauler the Longpire, Rags-o-Lantern, Fringy the Raven, and Werewolf. Completing the EFAP Halloween set. For every item you pick up together, the discount will increase. Be sure about what you'd like before it's too late, as the spooky season will not last forever. Find them all at makeship.com/shop/EFAP. All links can be found in the description. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting the show. We will see you next time.
We'll eat them or something.
Ugh, disgusting.